Hello there, and welcome to Origins of Earth, where curiosity takes the long way home.
And wonder settles in softly, like the quiet before a dream.
Tonight, we're wandering down a path that stretches far beyond memory, past history, and maybe even past humanity itself.
I want you to imagine something simple for a moment.
The night sky above, cold and endless, filled with the same stars.
That looked down on the very first people who ever looked back. Long before clocks, before nations, before even the idea of story as we know it.
There were just eyes and questions.
And from those questions came something we still carry today.
In our temples, our songs, our whispered prayers.
But what if all of it, everything we call religion, isn't something we invented?
What if it's something we inherited?
A message left behind, not by gods, but by the first civilization that ever walked this earth.
It's a strange thought, isn't it?
The idea that belief itself might be an artifact.
That every altar, every chant, every symbol carved into stone
Could be less about worship and more about remembering.
The first time I came across that idea,
I couldn't quite decide whether it was comforting or unsettling.
Maybe both.
After all, it means that beneath all our differences, all our languages and faiths,
And rituals, there could be a single root. A single voice, echoing through time. Trying to remind us of something important that we no longer understand.
Before we get too far into the mysteries, let's take a breath.
Where are you listening from tonight?
Maybe you're curled under blankets, with the lights low.
Or lying awake with a soft glow from your phone, painting the ceiling.
Maybe the sound of traffic hums faintly outside your window. Or maybe it's crickets and distant wind. Wherever you are, it's the perfect place to wonder about where we came from.
And if this kind of slow, thoughtful wandering
Feels like a good companion for the night.
I'd be grateful if you gave the video a like, or maybe subscribe.
It helps this small corner of calm find others who might need a quiet moment too. So, let's drift backward, not just through centuries, but through layers of forgetting. Imagine the world before writing, before history began its official records.
There were still civilizations, though we've lost their names.
We find their footprints in the dirt, in shards of pottery, in ruins swallowed by jungles.
And sometimes we find things that don't fit. Great stones carved with impossible precision. Myths that describe cataclysms long before anyone should have remembered them.
Languages that seem to appear fully formed, complex, structured.
As if copied rather than invented. These are the puzzles that make archaeologists sigh and storytellers smile.
Because maybe, just maybe, the answers are hidden, not in what we've dug up,
but in what we've always believed.
Plethora and anti-hertiensis. Religion, in all its forms, is one of humanity's constants.
Every known culture, from the most ancient to the modern, has carried some idea of the sacred.
It's as natural to us as art, as instinctive as rhythm. We pray, we chant, we seek meaning in the sky.
And we build monuments that outlast empires.
It's easy to say that this is just how humans cope with the unknown.
That gods were born from fear of thunder, or the need to explain death.
But what if those explanations are the surface of something much older?
What if the first civilization, the one that might have stood before all the ones we know,
encoded its knowledge in the only medium guaranteed to survive millennia?
Of erosion, fire, and forgetfulness. In Enio, faith.
think about how fragile information is. Paper burns, wood rots, metal corrodes.
But stories, once spoken, can live forever. They move from mouth to mouth, shaping themselves to each new tongue. A story can cross deserts, oceans, and generations.
A belief can persist, even when every trace of its origin is gone.
If you were part of an ancient people, watching your world crumble,
wouldn't you try to pass something on that couldn't die? You might not be able to preserve your machines or your libraries,
but you could wrap your knowledge in meaning.
Attach it to rituals, symbols, and words that people would remember.
because they had to. Because forgetting would feel like sacrilege.
Maybe that's why religion feels both human and alien at the same time.
It speaks to our emotions, our morality.
But it also carries fragments of things we don't fully understand.
Myths that sound like memories of real events, floods, fires.
Lights from the heavens, visitors who taught and vanished.
Every culture seems to have its own version. And they all point backward to to a golden age.
A time when gods, or teachers, or shining beings walked among us.
If they were all invented separately, it's a remarkable coincidence.
If they were inherited from a single vanished civilization. It's something else entirely. A signal that's been echoing for tens of thousands of years.
Of course, it's tempting to romanticize the past. We imagine lost continents and forgotten empires, Atlantis and Lemura.
As if the ruins must always hide something grand.
But there's a quieter possibility.
Maybe the first civilization wasn't vast or advanced in the way we think of it.
Maybe it was simply wise. Maybe they understood that knowledge without meaning fades.
That survival depends not only on tools, but on stories that teach you how to use them.
Religion in that sense could be a kind of code. A cultural encryption system that protects information by turning it sacred. The rituals ensure repetition. The symbolism ensures longevity. And the emotion ensures transmission. If you make someone feel awe, fear, or reverence, they'll remember. They'll tell others.
And even when the logic is gone, the ritual remains.
Consider the earliest monuments we know. Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. Built around 11,000 years ago, long before writing or agriculture as we define it.
Stone pillars carved with animals, arranged in circles.
Deliberately buried after centuries of use. Archaeologists call it a temple, though they're not sure to what. No homes were found nearby, no signs of everyday life.
Just the structures and the carvings.
It suggests that the impulse to build sacred spaces
came before the impulse to build cities.
Religion, in other words, might have been humanity's first architecture.
But what if that temple wasn't simply a place of worship?
What if it was a message, a monument encoding astronomical knowledge? Or even a memory of something the builders themselves didn't fully understand.
but were told to remember.
It's hard not to wonder who told them.
The idea of inheritance runs deep in ancient traditions.
In Egypt, the priests claimed their knowledge was older than the sands themselves.
In Mesopotamia, scribes wrote of earlier ages. When gods taught men the arts of civilization.
The Greeks spoke of the lost age of Chronos.
The Hindus described cycles of time so vast.
They make modern cosmology look modest.
Everywhere you look, there's a sense of something handed down.
Something that didn't start with them, but was carefully preserved.
When modern Caucasian male archaeologists decode these stories,
they often find kernels of truth hidden beneath the myth. Geological events, astronomical alignments.
Real floods, real migrations.
and maybe that's the point. Religion as inheritance isn't about perfect accuracy.
It's about continuity.
The philosopher Mircea Eliade once said that religion is a way of returning to origins.
Every ritual, he argued, reenacts a primordial act, bringing the participant closer to a time when the world was first ordered. In that sense, maybe all religions are attempts to remember.
For centuries, this massive bronze sentinel has marked the hours, its voice echoing across the valley.
A blueprint from the first civilization that told us how to live in balance.
How to read the sky. How to see ourselves as part of something larger.
Over time, that memory fractured. The blueprint became myth.
And now, thousands of years later, we pray to fragments of an ancient textbook.
You can see traces of that idea everywhere once you start looking.
The flood myth, for instance, appears in cultures that never met. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Hebrew Bible.
From ancient India to the Aztecs, it's always the same pattern.
The world is destroyed. A few survive.
They rebuild with guidance from the divine.
But what if it wasn't divine punishment at all? What if it was a historical memory of an actual flood?
Preserved and dramatized so that no one would forget what water can do.
The divine messenger becomes symbolic.
The boat becomes a metaphor, but the warning remains.
When we decode religion as message instead of myth,
it suddenly feels practical, less mysterious.
But more miraculous in a way.
Because it means people long before us cared enough to warn the future.
There's another layer to this idea, a psychological one.
Religion doesn't just preserve stories. It preserves emotion.
The feeling of reverence, the awe
of looking at something you can't explain.
Is one of the most enduring states of consciousness we know. It binds people together.
It creates identity, and it anchors memory.
Neuroscientists have found that emotional experiences are more easily remembered and transmitted.
So if the first civilization wanted to ensure that its wisdom survived,
even after words changed, the best strategy would be to tie that wisdom
to feelings that never fade.
Wonder, fear, gratitude, love.
The sense of something greater.
In that light, religion is less a system of control and more a technology of remembrance.
Of course, most modern scholars will tell you
that organized religion evolved gradually. The social structures grew, and people needed ways
to reinforce cooperation and moral codes.
And they're not wrong.
But that doesn't rule out the possibility that the impulse itself,
the sense of something sacred, has deeper roots.
Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies find that even the simplest groups have spiritual beliefs,
often centered on the natural world and ancestors.
Those could easily be remnants of something older.
a diluted inheritance from a time when the boundary
between the practical and the sacred didn't exist.
When to plant, when to hunt, when to migrate.
all encoded in stories about gods and spirits, ensuring the knowledge wasn't lost if one generation failed to explain the reasoning.
The more we learn about ancient sites, the more this pattern repeats. Alignments with solstices, equinoxes, and star clusters. Repetitions of the same symbols: spirals, eyes, serpents, trees. Across continents and millennia.
Coincidence? Perhaps.
But if you view religion as a long echo from a forgotten civilization,
those symbols might be words in a lost language.
The tree could be a map of lineage, or the structure of knowledge itself.
The serpent might represent cycles or energy. The spiral, time, or recursion.
We can't know for sure, but it's striking how these patterns refuse to fade.
They persist not just in temples, but in our subconscious, in dreams, in art.
We keep drawing them, carving them, revering them. as if they still whisper something important.
There's a quiet humility in this idea.
It suggests that belief isn't arrogance, but gratitude.
That we're caretakers of a story that began before we did.
And that we've been trying clumsily but earnestly to keep it alive.
When we kneel, light candles,
chant words in forgotten tongues.
maybe we're not just reaching upward to gods. Maybe we're reaching backward to ancestors who wanted us to remember what they knew.
The laws of balance, the cycles of the earth. The fragility of life, the promise of continuity. The gods could have been metaphors for principles.
The rituals could have been mnemonics for survival.
And we in our temples and churches and quiet prayers before sleep
might still be reciting lessons that once kept the world whole.
As the thought drifts through your mind, it doesn't need to settle into certainty.
It's enough to let it linger like an ember at the edge of imagination.
Maybe religion is proof that humanity once reached further than we remember.
Maybe it's proof that we've always wanted to.
The first civilization might have fallen.
But its words could have found a way to keep breathing through story, through song.
Through the universal habit of looking up and feeling small but connected.
And that perhaps is the oldest inheritance of all.
And so, as we move onward into the deeper layers of this mystery, keep that image with you.
The night sky, the quiet hum of memory.
And the faint echo of a voice that might have been calling to us since the dawn of thought. Before there were gods, there were questions.
Not the kind you ask out loud, but the kind that sit behind your eyes, while you stare at lightning splitting the sky. The kind that rise in your chest when you hear thunder echo off mountains, or see the shadow of an eclipse turn day into night.
Before names, before prayer, before altars or idols. There was wonder, raw, unfiltered wonder. And the uneasy knowledge that something vast and powerful was moving around us.
Through us and beyond our reach.
Imagine being among those first minds to notice patterns.
The same stars returning each season. The same sun climbing the same path. The rain coming after certain winds. The rivers swelling after certain moons.
It must have felt like living inside a puzzle that was alive.
One that sometimes offered food, warmth, and beauty.
And other times took it all away.
If you were there without maps or writing,
or the safety of history.
To explain anything, you might start to suspect that the world had moods.
That it could be pleased or angered. That there was a will inside the wind.
That's probably where it began, not with theology, but with empathy.
The ability to imagine that the world feels something back.
A flicker of consciousness looking out at the unknown and projecting itself onto it.
When the rain didn't come, maybe it was because the sky was sad. When the volcano roared, maybe it was because the earth was angry. It sounds naive now, but that instinct, that leap of imagination,
might be the very root of civilization.
Because once you start to imagine that the world has feelings,
you start to imagine that you can communicate with it.
You start to invent meaning.
The earliest evidence of symbolic behavior, ochre marks on cave walls. Beads made from shells far from the sea tells us that humans were thinking abstractly. Long before they built cities. They were assigning importance to things beyond survival.
they were decorating the world.
Might have been the beginning of religion.
Though the people making those marks wouldn't have used that word.
For them, it was probably something simpler.
Gratitude, maybe, or fear, or an attempt to speak.
To whatever kept the sun rising and the rivers flowing.
In a way, that's the most human thing imaginable.
When we can't understand something, we tell stories about it.
When we can't control it, we try to bargain with it.
Those first people standing beneath constellations that seem to move with intention
were the first to strike that ancient deal between ignorance and imagination.
They didn't need gods yet.
They just needed patterns that made sense.
And when you stare at something long enough, your mind will find them.
You can almost picture East Asian people of various ages gathering around the fire after a storm.
The ground still wet.
The air heavy with a smell of earth and smoke.
That mountain, it made the thunder.
When faced with the proposal, his answer was immediate and unequivocal. It was a sentiment echoed across the community.
No, it's the sky that speaks when the mountain breathes.
And somewhere in that conversation, somewhere between fear and laughter,
between lightning and storytelling, belief is born.
It's tempting to think of those moments as primitive.
As if we've outgrown them.
But have we?
We still talk to the sky.
We still make wishes to things that can't hear us.
We still assign meaning to coincidences, to dreams, to numbers.
To the strange alignments that make us feel like there's more going on
than we can see.
The only difference is that we've given those feelings names.
Written them into doctrines and printed them in books.
The impulse is the same.
The vocabulary just changed.
Before gods had names, the sacred wasn't something separate from the ordinary.
The hunt, the harvest, the sunrise, and the birth of a child.
All of it was infused with the same awe. There wasn't a word for religion because there wasn't a word for not religion.
The whole world was alive.
Every stone, every gust of wind, every wolf was part of the same conversation.
Anthropologists call this animism.
The belief that everything has spirit. But to early humans, it wasn't a belief at all.
The forest moved, the rivers sang, the stars returned.
How could they not be alive?
We often imagine progress as a straight line.
Superstition giving way to science.
But that's not how understanding actually works.
It's more like layers of sediment.
Each generation builds on what came before.
Not erasing it, but transforming it.
The language changes. The language changes.
The explanations shift, but the questions stay the same.
Why are we here? What happens when we die?
Why does the world feel like it's listening?
Those questions are as old as the first footprints left in wet clay.
In some of the oldest caves in France and Indonesia.
Paintings stretched deep into the earth.
Wood bison, mule deer, dwarf mammoths, handprints pressed in ochre.
Some archaeologists think those caves were used for rituals. That the drawings were part of an early attempt to communicate with the unseen.
Maybe they were, or maybe they were an attempt to remember.
The wolves became a memory device, a way of holding on to what mattered most.
The hunt, the herd, the turning of the seasons.
Memory itself might have been sacred then.
And memory, once sacred, doesn't stay small.
Once you begin to treat remembering as a duty, it becomes ritual.
You start to repeat gestures, songs, and symbols.
Because they keep the past alive.
Over generations, those repetitions solidify into something larger.
They gain weight, and somewhere in that process,
the nameless forces of nature start to acquire identities.
The storm isn't just a storm anymore.
The river becomes a mother, the sun a father, the moon a watchful eye. The world fills with presence. And when presence feels constant enough, it becomes godlike.
But if we think of this in the context of our question,
that religion might be what the first civilization left behind.
It takes on another meaning.
What if those early spirits weren't just metaphors for natural forces? What if they were stand-ins for memories of real teachers, real ancestors?
Real beings whose deeds were too great to be forgotten, but too complex to be understood.
Imagine a group of Middle Eastern male survivors from a fallen civilization.
Trying to teach scattered tribes what they once knew.
farming, astronomy, geometry, medicine.
To the tribes, these strangers would have seemed like gods. Beings of impossible knowledge. Over time, their lessons would turn into myths.
Their tools into relics, their language into prayers.
You can see hints of that pattern all over the world.
The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, beings who came from the heavens.
The Egyptians had Thoth, the god of writing and wisdom,
said to have given language and measurement to humankind.
The Maya had Kukulkan, the feathered serpent who brought law and learning.
The Greeks had Prometheus, stealing fire, technology from the gods.
The stories repeat across continents and centuries, always with the same arc.
Knowledge descending, chaos tamed, a spark passed down.
It could be coincidence. Or it could be that all these myths are distorted memories of the same event.
If that's true, then before gods had names, they might have had faces.
Not divine, but human, or at least something close.
The first civilization, whoever they were, may have realized
that the only way to preserve themselves was through transformation.
They couldn't survive as rulers or conquerors.
But they could survive as stories. They could encode their understanding of the world in narratives that would outlast their cities. It's a strange form of immortality to become myth.
But it works.
Thousands of years later, we're still talking about them.
Even now, archaeology keeps finding traces that make the timeline blur.
Tools older than expected.
Structures built with impossible precision. Civilizations that appear suddenly, fully formed, as if remembering.
Rather than inventing.
The Indus Valley, Sumer, Egypt, all emerging around the same window in history.
Each with writing, architecture, and mathematics already advanced.
How does that happen without a common ancestor?
Maybe they all inherited fragments of the same forgotten source.
Pieced together from memory and ritual.
The first civilization doesn't need to have ruled the world to have influenced it.
It just needed to leave seeds.
And what's the one thing guaranteed to make people guard something?
Across generations, meaning. Attach sacredness to it, and it becomes indestructible.
You can lose wars, languages, empires, but not belief.
Belief traves light.
It fits in stories, in songs, in gestures.
It hides in plain sight.
Passed from mother to child, from teacher to student, from priest to follower.
Even when its origin is lost, its rhythm survives. That's how religion works.
It keeps breathing long after memory dies.
When we look at ancient myths now, we often read them as symbolic.
As the sun ascends, it illuminates a world untouched by time, where the clouds themselves form an ocean beneath the highest summits. But what if they were once literal descriptions of real events?
That became unrecognizable after thousands of years of retelling.
The gods descended from the sky might sound mythical.
But to someone trying to describe a technological encounter,
With no vocabulary for it, what else could they say?
If you saw fire fall from the heavens, or machines that defied gravity, you'd describe them the only way you could.
As divine.
Still, it's important to remember that even if this is true.
It doesn't make those ancient people naive.
They weren't mistaking science for magic.
They were translating experience into meaning.
Building bridges between the seen and the unseen. We connect the dots even when we don't have all the dots.
And that act, the reaching, the trying to explain,
might be the oldest and most sacred impulse of all.
Before gods had names, there was no line between fact and myth.
Between the physical and the spiritual. The world was one thing, whole and alive.
Knowledge didn't belong to a separate realm.
To study the stars was to pray. To track the seasons was to worship.
To tell a story was to preserve a law of nature.
In that world, religion wasn't just what people believed.
It was what they did to stay alive.
And maybe that's the connection we've lost.
Over time, we've divided knowledge into categories.
Science for facts, religion for faith, art for feeling.
But in the beginning, they were one language.
Each reinforced the other.
Each was a way of describing the same reality.
If the first civilization left anything behind, it might have been that unity.
The reminder that understanding the world doesn't have to mean dividing it.
As we look back, those nameless beginnings remind us
that belief wasn't born from ignorance, but from curiosity.
It was the first attempt to make sense of chaos.
The first version of philosophy, astronomy, and storytelling combined.
And it's still with us.
Every time we look up and wonder, every time we whisper a wish,
or pause before beauty, we're echoing that same instinct.
We're continuing a conversation that started.
When someone long ago looked at the sky and decided it was listening. So maybe before gods had names, what we really had was awe.
The kind that doesn't demand worship, only attention.
The kind that makes you feel both small and vast at the same time.
And that perhaps is the real inheritance.
The spark of wonder that keeps asking, keeps imagining, keeps reaching. Because whether or not the first civilization meant to leave us a message,
They left us the capacity to listen.
And if you listen closely, between the sounds of the world turning,
the hum of your own breath, and the steady pulse of time.
Maybe you can still hear it.
The echo of a question older than speech.
Still waiting for an answer we haven't yet found.
When darkness covered the land, the only light humans knew
came from the sky and from fire.
both had power. Both demanded respect, but one could be touched, fed, shaped, and controlled.
The other was unreachable, distant, and mysterious.
Somewhere between those two lights, the one that burned in our hands and the one that burned above us, something remarkable happened.
Humanity began to tell stories that would outlast them.
And maybe if the idea that religion is what the first civilization left behind
has any truth to it, this is where that legacy started to glow again.
Around the fire, in the stories, in the sparks rising into the night. Firelight changes the way the world feels.
It makes shadows move.
It softens faces.
It makes time slow down.
It turns strangers into listeners.
Before there were books, or tablets, or carvings, there was the circle of warmth, where memory was born.
Think of how fragile knowledge must have been back then. Every idea had to live in someone's head.
And if that person didn't pass it on, it vanished.
So the fire wasn't just heat. It was the first archive, the first university, the first stage.
It was where the day's lessons turned into stories that could be remembered.
And that's where the theories begin.
When anthropologists stud oral traditions, they find something fascinating.
Cultures that have no written language can preserve stories accurately for thousands of years. Word for word, rhythm for rhythm.
Some Aboriginal songlines in Australia describe coastlines
that were last visible during the Ice Age.
Polynesian navigators can recall maps of stars across thousands of miles.
of open ocean without a compass.
Oral memory, when tied to ritual and story, becomes a kind of living hard drive.
It's not fragile at all.
It's incredibly resilient.
So imagine a civilization that knew this.
Imagine the first true civilization, the one that might have risen before any we know.
Realizing that its survival didn't depend on monuments or metal, but on memory.